Hello guys, I am Leah Anderson and today I'm going to be talking with you about Chapter 5, Oral English Development in Second Language Acquisition. And I took my book and I went through and highlighted facts that I felt like was important for you guys to learn from the chapter. And I also printed out the study guide and tried to go through those questions and make sure that I hit on each one of those in this video. So, to start out with, I do have a slideshow that I'm kind of going off of as well as my book. And my first slide is just oral language in perspective. Oral language is very important for ELLs. EL students working or playing, conversation is concrete, here and now topics and relevant. We have to ensure that students are talking to one another in class. In my practicum this week, I'm finishing up at the high school, at Cookeville High School, and I am having trouble with the students. They are talking to each other, but they're talking to each other in Spanish. So we have to get them talking in conversation in English. The next thing, I found a quote and it said that talking is a valued learning tool. I know that teachers oftentimes get tired of hearing everybody talk, and I constantly catch myself saying, hush, be quiet. But when ELL students are talking, if they are talking in English, they are learning from one another. Daily, we integrate 4 language processes: listening, speaking, reading, and writing in both home and school environments. Whether we're talking about an article, a phone bill, or a website with written content. Children with immigrant parents translate forms. I've seen this a lot in my elementary practicum. The parents would drop their students off in the classroom, and the child would run, bring me or my teacher a paper. They would tell us what they wanted to, and then they would go back to their parents and tell them. So the parents are learning too. This happens on the daily when teachers read picture books, and talk about the pictures. Not just looking at the pictures, you talk about them. And they perform in a play, have discussion about the text. This is another thing that goes along with listening and speaking. We have to give students opportunities to interweave oral and written language for functional, meaningful learning purposes. Children are grammatically competent in first language by the age of 5. Reading and writing competence is achieved at a staggered rate later on. ELLs obtain competency at a varied rate depending on what level they are at in their first language. And we will talk about this when we talk about the beginning traits of oral English proficiency. Let's see. ELLs obtain a varied rate depending on what level they are at in their first language. And we know that we don't want to forget about the first language. We just want to build on the first language. ELLs do not need proficiency in oral English to read and write in English. I thought that was very neat. ELLs do not need proficiency in oral English to read and write. That's just something to think about. The last thing I wanted to mention on this slide was, as oral language use increases, teachers must become aware of language forms, what word choice, grammar, pronunciation, social context, because the ELLs need to hear that English that adults that they come in contact with are speaking. That's how they learn the best from them. I noticed that our first question on our study guide is define and discuss integrated language arts instruction for ELLs. And on page 162 of our book. I'm not going to read word for word from our book because I know you all have a book and you're capable of doing that. Okay, make sure that was on. It says this paragraph is, why is integrated approach to English language arts important? And what I highlighted from that was, this approach focuses squarely on using oral and written language for meaningful, functional purposes as a means of English language development with comprehensible input and social interaction naturally built in. To me, this means that we as teachers are giving ELL students opportunities to talk, not just us do all of the talking, because later on the book says that, right here it says that the teacher does 65 to 95% of the talking. So we want to try to decrease that and let the students do more of the talking. It also says that integrated language arts instruction contrasts with teaching approaches that focus on teaching the 4 language processes separately. So there's that. And I also highlighted that in all these situations, a written text has been the subject of oral discussion and interpretation, demonstrating how oral and written language are naturally interwoven at the service of learning. I know one of the questions was, what's the difference, or what are the relationships among written and oral language? And I have that later on, so we'll get to that later on. I'm on next on my slide. I wanted to show you this diagram, the dynamic relationships among oral and written language. So I am getting to that. If I can turn this around. You can see that right there. Reading and writing, and then you have speaking until listening. You have receptive language uses and productive language uses. Okay, sorry, I am also using my phone, so I did not know that you could not turn the camera around while you're videoing. But we're going to go on. Okay, we're going to keep going. Now we're going to talk about, this is another question, we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, is describe traits of beginning and intermediate oral English proficiency. And I found that on page 168 starts out second language oral proficiency of beginning English learners. And it talks about the first phase as when students are first exposed to the new language. They don't come in automatically knowing English. We all know that would be crazy. And I think that, I don't know if you guys, but like me, the practicum that I'm in now really opened to my eyes to how many ELLs we have in our school systems. It says that early on, the child may neither understand nor speak a word of English. Language comprehension develops as a result of opportunities for social interaction with speakers of the new language. That would be as in their peers and us as adults. It goes on to say that at this point, their speech is likely to be limited to simple phrases and expressions that have highly functional community payoffs, such as okay, no, want to play. Simple things that they have heard people say that they know that they can say now. Another thing that I highlighted was when students are entering this beginning stage of oral English proficiency, they need to have a buddy in their class. Maybe The book says that by assigning the new student to a home group and designing a buddy, preferably one who speaks the child's home language, the buddy accompanies the new learner everywhere throughout the school day, including the bathroom, cafeteria, and bus stop. This makes the child feel comfortable and safe in the environment, that they have someone that they can talk to that understands them. And also that buddy is going to help them become aware of the normal schedule and how the school and the teacher does things. So, and also I have on my slide that teachers should provide social, emotional support by assigning new students to a home group and a buddy. We just talked about that. Support for participation comes from 3 sources: the teacher, other students, and newcomers. I think it is important that we talk with our students and let them know that this child may not understand everything we say because they don't speak our language, and encourage them to always try to help that ELL student to feel safe and feel that they are part of the classroom. Another one I have is can participate in a group project throughout artistic measures. Maybe if they can't write, they can draw, and we know that we can understand writing as in drawing. And also allow for sheltering techniques, gesturing, paraphrasing, and checking for understanding on a small level. Allow for social interaction between students. Maybe you can find 5 minutes of your day, 10 minutes after every subject to let the students interact with one another and talk, so that ELL student is getting to hear more conversations in English. And next we have the intermediate oral language development. And that begins on page 170. It says intermediate English, I'm getting this from our book. Intermediate English learners are able to understand and speak English in face-to-face interactions, and they are able to speak with minimum hesitation and relatively few misunderstandings. Even though that at the intermediate level they are becoming more fluent, it's still important not to correct mid-sentence or mid-story. Let them get what they're wanting to say out, and then maybe go back and try to correct so that they will know better next time. Also, syntax, semantics, phonology are developing. They still might do things like confuse he with she, and they might have a little problem with verbs, getting the verbs in the right order of their sentence. In this stage, you still have to continue sheltering techniques, and that might be including charts in your lessons, graphic organizers. I love graphic organizers and think that everybody should use them no matter what, because it just gives students a place to organize their thoughts. And especially for an ELL student, it doesn't make them feel overwhelmed by so much information if they have a graphic organizer organizing different materials and such. And also concrete pictures and objects. You can give students at this level more linguistically demanding activities, such as if you're reading a story, let them read a paragraph, or speaking part in a play, being a leader of a small group discussion, or even if you were doing a science experiment, maybe they could be the record keeper or something like that. And so that is question number 2 of our study guide, describing traits of beginning and intermediate oral English proficiency. Next, they talked about ways to, this is also a question on our study guide, promote oral language development through strategies. And the book lists tons on page 172 through 179. Some of those were games, podcasts to enhance English learning in your classroom, songs, drama, dramatic poetry, show and tell, one looks, one doesn't, riddles, choral reading, tapping, and other things like that. And I did have a video I was going to show you, but it's just of some students singing a song, and the ELL students change the words to it, and they get up in front of their class, and you can see that the ELL students really enjoyed doing that. They felt comfortable in front of the class, and they did mess up on some of it, but no one even noticed it. So that was a good way to promote oral language development. I also liked the show and tell because an ELL student could bring something from their home, and it might have to do with their native language, and they could come explain that to the class and the teacher in English. So that would make them feel important, and they would be learning, getting an opportunity to express their oral language development skills. The next question deals with, on our study guide, is how to assess and document ELL's oral language development. And I found some information about that on page 185. The heading said, "How may we assess English learners' oral language competence?" It begins to say, in this section, we describe how to document and assess students' oral language progress through 1. Informal classroom observations, 2. Anecdotal records, and 3. Using a constructed oral language observation instrument called the Student Oral Language Observation Matrix, and that is shortened for SOLOM. And one of the questions under number 4 of our study guide says, what is the SOLOM and how is it used? It goes on to say that the SOLOM focuses your attention on the 5 oral language traits, which are comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. And informal classroom observations include a variety of oral language behaviors that you wish to document, including particular grammatical structures, vocabulary, conversational interactions, and presential skills. Checklists are also helpful and easy for making or marking during your observation. If you have a checklist in front of you while you're observing a student, all you have to do is simple checks and you can go right on. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the SOLOM was, this says, by combining your focus observations over time with descriptive evaluations in the SOLOM, you will be able to document student progress in English language development. It also says this is organized to focus your attention on general oral language traits. We already mentioned those traits. On page 186 of our book, it has those traits and kind of how you would observe those. There's what it looks like. That might have been upside down. I'm sorry if it was, but you have it in your book. It goes on to say on page 187, to use the SOLOM, you observe a student during a classroom activity that promotes oral language use, such as group work. You spend no more than 5 minutes, and you listen to see if the speech interactions among the members of the group are paying particular attention to the student or groups you wish to evaluate. And one of the questions was, what is an anecdotal record and how is it used? I found on page 190 that an anecdotal record is a running account of an observed oral language event written on the spot, describing the event and quoting the participants as closely as possible to convey how the interaction unfolds in real time. So, that is what an anecdotal record is. And the benefit of an anecdotal observation is that you need record interactions, that you need to record interactions as they occur. That way you know exactly what happened instead of waiting 10 minutes and you can't remember what happened. Anecdotal observations are much more open-ended and provide more richer detail of student behavior. So, this chapter is really full of a lot of great information. And the last thing that I would like to talk about before ending this video, even though it's not on the study guide, is differentiating instruction for oral language development, because that is something that I feel like is very hard for teachers to do. It says on page 193, differentiating instruction for oral language development requires consideration of students' oral English proficiency in relation to content standards, objectives, and performance expectations. And I think we can differentiate the instruction by doing a framework that includes questions like who, what, how, and when. You will know where each student is based on observations and daily contact with each student, so that helps with providing them with the instruction they need. We also should consider each student's ability when creating groups. You need to consider where they're at in their English proficiency and their primary language abilities. So, and I also think it's very important to use group work for ELL students. So, that is all I have. Sorry this video was crazy.